right, so the first thing that happened, how many guys have drawn this, pre-drawn this? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing, this is the what system? This is what?
RAAS.
Which is what?
Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system.
Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. Okay? Now, I think last time we didn't start the aldosterone part, right? We did not?
We
did.
kind of did.
Yeah.
Did I go over the principles of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the first thing that happens is, in this situation, we have some type of pressure reduction of the circulatory system, right? So whatever might cause that, okay? Car accident, knife wound, gunshot wound, whatever, okay? We end up with loss of blood pressure. So as we experience a loss of blood pressure in the circulatory system, right? The kidneys will start experiencing that loss of reduction of blood pressure. So in the afferent arterioles, which is before this thing, which is called the what? This head here is called the what? Starts with a G. Glomerulus. Okay, so this is the glomerulus, right? So as we start to experience a reduction in pressure here, we have these cells on the endothelium of this arteriole, and these cells are called what? What's the name of the cell? Pulcosyn cells. Pulcosyn cells. And these cells are baroreceptors. And what is a baroreceptor? Pressure monitoring devices. Okay. As that is experienced, then renin is released into the arteriole, right? So we have the Pulcosyn cells, which are baroreceptors, experience the reduction in pressure here first, which causes the release of renin into the circulatory system. Okay? Now, as this pressure starts, or this blood starts to keep moving through this arteriole, the glomerulus is next on the list, and at the glomerulus is where filtration occurs. Okay? So this is where filtration occurs. All right, now, remember what we said, filtration always occurs under pressure. And this is called, you guys remember? Something that is filtered is called what? Filtrate. All right, filtrate. All right, so that filtrate is reduced because the amount of pressure is reduced. Remember, filtration occurs under pressure, right? So then we have, in the lumen of this nephron, we have these cells here. And these cells are responsible for removing sodium. So they take sodium out of the filtrate. Sodium out of the filtrate. Okay, and we get about, normally is 65% of the sodium here and about 25% here. Okay, so as the filtrate, what does it do? Is it the pressure is reduced? What happens to the filtrate? It actually what?
It grabs more sodium.
Right, it slows down. So we end up with removing more sodium. So we end up, instead of about 10% here, we end up with about, well, less than 10%, let's just say that, of the sodium here. Okay? Now, why is that important? Because we have these cells over here. We have these cells over here, and these particular cells, okay, these cells are called what?
Good.
Right. And these are chemo sensors.
Boom.
Right? And they sense the amount of sodium in the nephron. Okay? Now, when it drops below 10%, these macular density cells don't know that there's a blood pressure problem. They know there's a glomerular problem. So they don't know what's going on. They just know that there's a problem with sodium getting here. So they actually stimulate through prostaglandins, which are communicators, and nitric oxide also, which is a communicator, to release more renin. To release more renin. Okay? All right, so we have baroreceptors, chemosensor, and one more, which is called a neurosensor, all right, which is going to come from the carotid sinus up here, which is also a what? Baroreceptor. Okay, and then through cranial nerve number
9.
glossopharyngeal nerve, that's the glossopharyngeal nerve, okay? The cranial nerve number 9, it sends out from the midbrain or the vasomotor control, sends out a signal of sympathetic outflow to post-ganglionic fibers, to signal to a nerve back to receptors here, which are what? We're right in here, which are beta 1 andronergic receptors. I'm gonna write that up. Beta 1. Andronergic. Okay. Beta 1 andro. This is where we'll find what type of blood pressure medicine?
Beta blockers.
Beta blockers.
Beta blockers. One of the places. Beta blockers. Okay, so let me write that over there. Also, it's called post-sympathetic outflow. Post-ganglionic.
Yeah.
The ganglion is just a bundle of nerve connections from the spinal cord, okay? So it's just it's after that is all that means, post-ganglionic sympathetic fight or flight, right? Outflow, over to the beta 1 andronergic receptors. Now, where it's sending it to has 3 different inputs to it, right? It has the pressure, the baroreceptor, it has the chemosensor, and it has the beta 1 receptors, okay? That's neurological input. That whole thing there is called the, what?
The
Juxtaglomerular apparatus, okay? What does juxta mean? Next to, right?
Oh, it is?
Mark Taylor makes coffee for his chemistry students. He brings wheels in a big car with a big giant super tanker filled with coffee. How come you don't do that? Okay, all right, so that finishes up. We have, so Pocussin cells, macula densa, and neurological input from postganglionic sympathetic outflow. Okay? All right. Now remember, this whole process is to do what? To raise blood pressure, right? Okay. Now, remember, what is renin?
It's an enzyme.
Renin is an enzyme. Let's add to our stuff going on over here. Okay, all right, so we release renin into the circulatory system, right? And then renin in the circulatory system, which is an enzyme, which does what?
Lowers the energy level.
Lowers the energy of activation. Okay, so it actually speeds up reactions. So in normal time, your liver is producing these proteins, lots of proteins, right? That's its job. So one of its jobs. So it releases a protein called Angiotensinogen. Not yet. AGT, right? So angiotensinogen plus renin yields what?
Angiotensin 1.
Angiotensin 1. Okay, so angiotensin 1, which is a decapeptide. Okay, angiotensin 1, which is a decapeptide. All right. Now, on the endothelial lining of the capillaries in the lungs, expressed there is an enzyme called what?
ACE. Yeah, ACE.
You're happy you knew that. Make a little smiley face. Happy little enzymes. Okay, that is ACE. Okay, that is ACE. So angiotensin 1 plus ACE yield what?
AT2.
Angiotensin 2. Okay. Is it- oh. Okay, what does angio mean? What does angio mean?
Blood vessels.
Angio actually means blood, exactly, blood vessels, okay? So blood vessels, so angiotensin, pressure, right? Force. Angiotensin 1 and 2. Okay, so angiotensin 1 and 2, all right? So that's what our ACE does, okay? So we end up with angiotensin 2. Of course, ACE is where we'll find what type of blood pressure medicines?
ACE inhibitors.
ACE inhibitors like so anything that is something prill, enalapril, lisinopril, eosinopril, okay? Any of those are prills, okay? All right, so angiotensin 2 then will proceed to where? Circulatory system. Okay. Okay, so angiotensin 2 will move over. Well, I guess I have to say one more thing. Okay, so ACE also will do what? We have the stuff in our protein in our blood called bradykinin. Okay, so bradykinin is a what? It's a protein, but what is it? What? Yes. Bradykinin is a very powerful vasodilator. Okay, so it deactivates bradykinin. It deactivates bradykinin. Okay, deactivates bradykinin. Angiotensin 2 is a very powerful what?
Vasoconstrictor.
There you go. A very powerful vasoconstrictor. Okay, very powerful vasoconstrictor. So the goal is to do what? Is to raise our blood pressure. If I open the blood vessels, blood pressure drops. If I squeeze them, blood pressure goes up. Okay? All right, so angiotensin 2 then comes over to, or is in, the venous system, which we call veins are what? Capacitance vessels. They store about 70% of our blood. Okay? They store about 70% of our blood. And when angiotensin 2 reacts with the veins, it causes them to constrict. All right? It causes them to constrict, which forces the blood to do what?
Go back up.
Up to what? The what? Say it again. The right atrium. Forces the blood back into the right atrium. Into the right atrium. The right atrium, with increased blood flow back into the right atrium, will have what happen?
Vein bridge reflex.
What is it?
Vein bridge
Vein
reflex.
bridge, right. Vein bridge reflex. Okay, the vein bridge reflex, which causes increased heart rate, right? Which forces blood back into the lungs through the pulmonary circuit, right?
Mhm.
Back to the left,
Atrium,
then the left,
ventricle.
which causes an increased blood in there, which causes an increase in stretch in the ventricle, which is Frank Starling's law of contraction. Which just states that increased stretch within its physiological limits will cause an increase in contraction or output, cardiac output, in diastolic volume, right? In diastolic volume. So increase cardiac output or in diastolic volume. Now, so dealing with the venous side, so venous return through the influence of angiotensin II will cause increase in what? So let's look for what? Systolic pressure. Okay, so that's the venous return from angiotensin II. Okay. Now, angiotensin II also affects the what?
The adrenal gland?
Wait, we're not there yet. One more. Right, there's two
The
parts to blood pressure, right? There's systole and
Diastole.
diastole. Right. Okay. So the next one is the angiotensin II will affect the what? So this is a what? What are these ones? What are these things?
Capillary.
So this is the pre-capillary sphincter. Okay. So pre-capillary. Precapillary sphincter. Okay, precapillary sphincter will shut under or close down under angiotensin II effect, right? Okay, so now, if I shut the precapillary sphincters, what happens? What happens? So if I don't give the blood an outlet, it's a closed loop, right? Closed system. So if I don't give the blood an outlet, it backs up. So it backs up under diastolic, right? The system of diastole. Okay, so under the arterial influence, or return, angiotensin II. Angiotensin II causes the precapillary sphincters, so an increase in diastole pressure. Okay, so we've had okay? Does that make sense so far? All right, so angiotensin II then will proceed down or through the circulatory system to get to the adrenal gland, to the outermost layer, which is what? Zona glomerulosa. Okay, now zona glomerulosa, after being stimulated by angiotensin 2, will release what? It releases aldosterone. Did we go further than this last time?
Yes.
We went through like each gene?
You drew
Yes.
this cell thing.
Okay.
You drew this.
All right, so this cell is called what?
Principal.
Okay. So this is aldosterone. So aldosterone affects receptors on receptors on the nucleus of the cell, right? Of this principal cell. Okay, now that first gene is for what? Sodium potassium pumps on the basolateral surface. Okay, so those are sodium potassium pumps on the basolateral surface. And of course, sodium, we're trying to hold on to sodium. Sodium, right? And potassium goes in. Bless you. Okay, the second gene is sodium channels. And the third gene is potassium channels, not calcium. Potassium channels. I jumped right on board on that, didn't I? All right, so sodium is, remember, we moved sodium out, we pumped it out. It's an active process, so we have our deficit of sodium inside the P cell. So we have sodium in here, and then so the sodium will do what?
Diffuse inside.
So sodium diffuses into the P cell. And we have a surplus of potassium in here, so it does what when we open potassium channels here? It diffuses out. Okay, diffuses out. Okay? Okay, so now let's talk that a little bit more. So everyone's okay with that, right? I'll come add to that list over there in just a second. Okay, so we have angiotensin 2 also affects, well, let's say it like this. Angiotensin 2 affects a hormone that is used to retain water. So where does ADH work? Where does it work?
The kidney?
The kidneys, right? Where does it produce? Where does it produce? No. Where's it produced? Someone was getting close to it. There you go. The supraoptic nuclei inside the brain produces ADH. Then it is sent through axoplasmic transport through the nerves to the posterior pituitary or the neural hypophysis, right? Okay, so we can show that here. So angiotensin 2 affects the supraoptic nuclei, which then sends ADH to the posterior pituitary, which then sends that down to here. Now this is anti-diuretic hormone. Right? Down to the distal convolutional distal loop of Henle, where it opens more water channels. And if we open water channels, remember water is going to flow to an area of more of hypertonicity, right? So then this water then will start to not leak, osmosis, right? As they go down in this, the tone gets higher on the inside of this loop and more water gets pulled out. So we end up with increased water retention.
So swelling.
Okay. Remember, we're trying to retain blood pressure, right? So we want to save as much water as we can. Okay, so that is that process through the antidiuretic hormone. Okay, next we have some more sympathetic outflow. And let's do it like this. Okay. So what did we say the sympathetic neurotransmitter was? Epinephrine from?
Adrenal cortex, or no? The medulla.
There you go. So the cortex is on the outside, right? Medulla is on the inside, okay? All right, so we have this sympathetic outflow that stimulates any target tissue. All tissue has a response to a sympathetic innervation, okay? Yeah, it says end plate or target tissue. So it's all target tissue, your whole body. So what we have then, this is, I'm not just talking about other tissue, I'm still talking about this tissue too. I'm talking about this tissue too, and this tissue too, and this tissue too. So all tissue has these receptors for this target tissue for this sympathetic process. So what happens here is, we said epinephrine or norepinephrine, right, is a neurotransmitter, right? And neurotransmitters generally stay where? What's this? The gap there is called the synaptic cleft. Okay? So that neurotransmitter is released into the synaptic cleft, which stimulates receptors on the target tissue, sympathetic receptors on the target tissue, right? Beta 1 adrenergic receptors, okay? Causes them to release more epinephrine, norepinephrine into the synaptic cleft, which stimulates the tissue. So we have an increase in epinephrine release through vesicular or exocytosis, vesicular transport, right? You guys remember all those crazy words? Okay? All right, so now we have increased neurotransmitter, and now we have a decrease in neurotransmitter reuptake. What does reuptake mean? Bring it back in. So a lot of times when we get rid of these, we don't just get rid of them. We don't use something like epinephrine ACE, which would break it down like we use acetylcholinesterase. We actually bring it back into the axon transport. So what we do is we say, well, don't bring it back in. Okay, so just leave it in the synaptic cleft. So we have an increase in let's say epinephrine release, and a decrease in epinephrine reuptake through all sympathetic tissue. Okay, so that right there is a huge amplification to your system, to your body. Okay, so any of you guys ever do any hunting? Anyone hunt? Anyone hunt? Have you ever, when you dissect fresh kill, what happens to the intestines and all that stuff? Do you know? Have you seen it that fresh? Well, anyway, they constrict. All right, so you could pull out what you would think would be the digestive organs and things like that, and they would be slimy, but they're actually they're tight, they're hard when you pull them out because they're going through this amplification. All right, that's just a graphic description of what actually happens. I'm trying to get you to understand that the whole system is going through sympathetic constriction. That's why we call it fight or flight, not rest and digest. You can't do anything when your guts are like that, bound up in a knot, as it were. Okay. And then finally, the last thing, that angiotensin II. How many of you guys have ever cut yourself pretty bad? Bled pretty substantially. Anyway, bled some way? Anything? Nothing? Well, what happens is you'll actually get thirsty. Right? You actually will hunt down water. You'll become very thirsty. So it stimulates thirst centers.
Oh, come on.
What exactly stimulates thirst?
Angiotensin II.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so give you a minute to kind of go get your notes squared away and let me have a drink of coffee here, and then you guys can, I'll go through it one more time in just a second, okay? And we'll go from go to woe, so if you want to record this at that time, that's